Kosher Kitchen. We are up to lesson number 16, and it's a very, very, very common, popular issue that comes up a lot. And I think if we can understand maybe some of the principles, we'll appreciate how halacha deals with the food, the pot, the other stuff that's in there. So let's start with what the Gemara says. Jump down to the bottom of page 156, because that's actually the case. Okay? So here we go. We have a fish that is going to be cooked in a bisari, in a fleshik pot. So the Gemara says, a fish that is literally alu and placed into a meat pot. So it's a kara, it's a fleshik dish. Rav says you cannot eat that fish with koteach. You would not be allowed to eat that fish with something which is milchik. Shmuel says no, it can be eaten with kutach. Sorry, not koteach, kutach, sorry. Now, why? So Rav says it's usher to eat the fish because it has some type of meaty, some taste of fleshiks inside. And Shmuel says no, the meaty taste is what's called nat bar nat, which stands for no tain tam. No sein tam bar, no sein tam. The imparted taste of an imparted taste. Meaning, what's the imparted taste of an imparted taste? Let's go through this. You had at one point in time, let's say a week ago, you had a meat pot. In this meat pot, you cooked meat. The meat went inside your pot. So therefore, it was something, gave, i.e. the meat, gave its taste and imparted into the pot. You're then taking this pot, and you're now cooking fish inside of this dish, inside of this pot. Now what is happening is the pot is in giving its taste over into, now here's what's interesting. How are you cooking up this fish? Yeah?
Right, I'm confused about why this is any different to what we were talking about when we were cooking part.
Okay, so the truth is this is going to be the source of that. This is the source of that. Yeah. And the reason is because, again, according to Shmuel, is because the concept of nat bar nat, no sein tam bar no sein tam. So one is giving a taste. That taste is then being given out into the fish. Again, so the question is, what is the status of that fish? So says Shmuel, what are you talking about? Says Rav, it's not. I apologize. Says Shmuel, it's not a problem. It's 2 steps away from imparting taste. Meaning you have your pot that's going inside the fish, and then and that taste that's going inside the fish, it's not usher, right? It's not usher. It's just the meat that went inside of it. He says it's considered, it's not significant enough, and you'd be allowed to eat it with something dairy. So we'll come back to that and we'll explain one step that might be important. Chizkiah says the name of Abaye, fish that was literally brought to the table in a meaty serving plate, you can eat it with milk. Okay, so those are the 3 opinions that we see in the Gemara, and now let's try to explain them a little bit more. Okay, if you go down to the following, go down to the halacha, save some time here, Svardim. The Machaber says there's no difference between fish that is roasted or cooked in a meaty pot. What's the difference between roasted or cooked? What's the difference between food that's roasted or cooked? Liquid. Very important. Why? Because really, if you really think about it, if you have a fleshik pot and you are cooking something, so what's happening is the taste of the pot is going into the water. The water is then going into that, let's say in our case, the fish. Right? And those tastes are permitted tastes. There's no issue of milk and meat. They're permitted tastes. And then the question is there eating that piece of fish with meat? So according to Svardim, here's a classic example of a leniency by Svardim. According to the Svardim, it says there's no difference between fish that is roasted or cooked in meaty pot. In both cases, it is permissible. It is mutar to eat it with milchek. So you can take this fish and eat it with dairy. However, you should not cook in a meaty pot intentionally with the intent of eating the food with milchek. Only b'di'evet, if you ended up cooking this fish in a fleshik pot, could you eat it with milchek? But lechatchila, you shouldn't do it. What about Ashkenazim? Of course, it's going to be more strict. Ashkenazim, only if it was placed in a meaty plate may one eat it with milchek. However, if it's cooked or roasted in a fleishik pot, you should not eat it with milchek. If by accident, let's say they're mixed together, you'd be allowed to eat the mixture. So again, your fish which is cooked in a fleishik pot, for Rosh Ashkenazi here, cannot be eaten with milchek. If it is mixed up, let's say you had a piece of fish that was cooked in this pot, you have a piece of fish that was cooked in another pot, and these pieces of fish got mixed up, and you don't know, you'd be allowed to eat all of them with milchek directly. But again, that's obviously b'diavad. You'd never be allowed to do it and serve it and get it mixed up. That you'd never be allowed to do. Okay? I think many of us are familiar with that. Let's do some processing for anybody here. Next page. Now the Shach says, in the name of the Rashal, that only food cooked in a meaty pot and mixed with milk is permitted after the fact. If it's roasted on a meaty grill, again, you don't have that medium of water, it is forbidden even b'di'evet if it was mixed later on with milchek. Then you got to find out about shishim and all that stuff. So again, the Shach says there's a distinction between roasting and between cooking. If it was roasted, if someone was put on a barbecue and your barbecue is actually fleishik, right? Let's say you have leftover pieces of meat or this, right? Then you would not be allowed to eat that with dairy. Not only eat it with dairy, but should it by mistake get mixed up with dairy, then you'd have to make sure that you have 60 against this piece of fish that was cooked on a fleishik thing. Okay? The Pesach Tshuva brings opinion from Megadim. The Chavada says, according to this, if fish or rice were boiled in a meat pot, the water, this is a good case. The water is forbidden if it's mixed with milk, even b'di'evet. So this is actually chumrah that some people are not aware of. So let's say, for example, I make rice. And my rice, you're not supposed to have water left over from rice. Even I know that. The whole idea is that you make rice that the water disappears. This person didn't know what they were talking about there. Would you ever make rice and have the water left over? No, the whole point is the water to disappear into the rice. Alright, that's not a very good example. Let's use boil pasta. Okay, I guess I can. So we're taking pasta.
Rice pasta.
Instead of pasta, means rice. So I'm making pasta. My pasta's in a fleishik pot. My pasta has water in it because I'm cooking rice. And we have to also assume that the cheese, obviously that was pasta's part. Well, get the cheese. That's for sure not a problem. That water that was used to make the pasta is going to be directly affected from the fleishik pot, and that water, should it get mixed in with something milchik, is going to, according to the Pesach Tshuva, be problematic. Why? Because the water received a strong taste from the pot, like this roasting. But the fish or the rice would be permitted because that's what's called a third level. That's called no sein tam, bar no sein tam. 3 levels of giving off emitting taste. As opposed to that water is only 2. Right? The 3 levels would be the meat into the pot in the water, and the water into the fish. As opposed to that water by itself is only 2 levels, and that would be problematic. Okay? Good. So, any questions so far? Yeah.
So for Ashkenazi, you can, if you make
But that fish,
if it was cooked in water?
That water should not be used for milchiks at all.
Okay,
but the fish, you would be, the eved would be allowed to milk, but you shouldn't eat it separate. But if it does, so then that's okay.
And
you shouldn't.
What level makes it like if let's say you have pasta sitting in your fridge, like a ton of pasta that someone made in a fleishik pot, and they stuck it in a container and put it in the fridge, and they open up the fridge and decide, I want some to eat for lunch, and and they specifically put it in a container that says fleishik, so you know it's cooked in a fleishik pot. Do you have to go make yourself new pasta, or is that a situation where you say, I wasn't really planning on...
Wait, so if I have my pasta in a fleishik pot that's in a fleishik container... No.
It was cooked in a fleishik pot. Okay, somehow you know it was cooked in a fleishik pot.
Cooked in a
fleishik pot.
pot.
Cook it for the purpose of eating it with dairy, but now there's leftover pasta.
That's sitting in a container.
And
that's not b'diavad. No, you would not be allowed to do that and eat it with dairy, because that's meaning b'diavad it's already.
You didn't know.
You didn't know. It's already on the table. It's already cooked, mixed in together. Yeah. Good question.
But that actually, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, but that's actually a good question. That what if it's mixed together already, but you do know now.
No, but again, it's b'diavad.
Then throw it up.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
What?
Yeah, she'd be allowed to eat it, but meaning if you again, if it's here's what's important to remember: you should.
So
if it's considered a financial loss or you don't have time, so b'diavad you'd be allowed to eat it. If you'd be able to get hold of other food, you know what I mean? If you'd be able to. Yeah. Meaning, okay, so throw it out. Yeah, throw it out.
Is this the case where the pot has been used for meat within 24 hours, or it doesn't matter?
You actually ask a very good question. Let's say for now that it has not been used in 24 hours. You still should do it.
And the same with pasta.
Yeah, it's okay. So again, here's the case here. You boil a hot dog in a pot of water. You boil rice in the same pot later with different water. The water would be permitted with milk according to the strict opinion. What's that called? I never understand what they were asking. Oh, they're asking a question. Oh, I see. Oh, I see what's going on here. So it's a different case. So if they were to do the following, someone takes a pot, which is fleishik, and makes hot dogs. And there's water in there because that's what you boil hot dogs. Now, what are you doing? Later that day, you take different water, and you heat up rice with it. And that water that was made with rice, again, although I don't understand how you can have water with rice, but that's irrelevant for now, would you be allowed to have that water with dairy? And really, having that water with dairy, what is the situation? Take a look at the Mishnah. There's different opinions. Mishnah Zahav says, if the first taste was given off by the food, enters a utensil, but becomes weakened, but not if the first taste goes into food. Meaning, if by having a medium, by having food go into a pot, that creates a much stronger taste than if it's water that is going into a pot. Right? That's water that, let's say, had milchiks that was cooked inside of it. So the Mishnah Zahav wants to make a distinction between the two. The Chavda says no. It doesn't make it no same time as the same whether the first taster goes into a pot or if it goes into the water. Therefore, if the meat is cooked in a pot with water and then fish was roasted in the pan, it would be permitted b'di'eved to have it with milchiks. Why? Because the taste of the fish are still 3 steps away. What are the 3 steps away? Meat into the water, water into the pot, and plate into the fish. So that's what he wants to argue. But again, it's only b'di'eved eating it together. Right? So when we talk about b'di'eved, a classic example would be you literally have nothing else to eat, you're out, you're hungry, you have guests coming over, it's Erev Shabbos. Those are cases of b'di'eved. Yeah.
And then if you ate it without knowing, you wouldn't be over on that.
Right, if you ate it without knowing, so, right. Yeah. Okay. Now, the Shach points out that even according to the Mechaber, one may not cook in a meaty pot if he has the intention to eat it with milchiks. Right? We said that already. That even the Mechaber, even the Shulchan Aruch, who says that you're allowed to eat food cooked in a dairy pot with meat, he says you're absolutely not allowed to do that with the intent of doing that. right? If you do it by mistake, it's one thing, but to intentionally do it, you're not allowed to do it. The Taz says that even just placing food on a meaty plate is usher to do, if that's what you intended. Meaning, people don't realize this, that even taking food, I cook pasta in a meat pot, I should not serve that pasta on a dairy serving dish, on a dairy plate, on a dairy serving dish, plate thingy, right? That you cannot do that. Why? Because if it was cooked in a milchik pot, the pasta has a status of quasi-milchik. It shouldn't be done on fleshik. So again, but the evidence again, it's not kosher, but you should have. When Chazal came up with the minhag of separate kelim, they actually meant separate kelim. They didn't like you cooking things in fleshik pots and then putting them on milchik pots. So again, if everything is cold all the time, if you're not cooking, meaning if you're using a storage, I don't know, it's a crazy, right? You're storing apples in a fleshik pot. You'd be allowed to take those apples that are stored in a fleshik pot and put it onto a milchik tray to serve, right? That's of course you're allowed to do. But they didn't like the idea of you cooking in a meat and serving it on dairy, or vice versa. Which is why you have pasta. You would normally use it for cook it in parv, and then you can do what you want with it afterwards.
But if you had a fleshik pot and you put cold milk in it.
If I have a fleshik pot and put cold milk into it,
the pot's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So then,
because it's cold. We're not cooking anything.
Right, but like the pasta has been in the fridge. It's cold. It's as cold as milk. Milk has also been pasta.
Right. So you shouldn't lechatchila put cold milk in a fleshik pot. Meaning, if you do it, it's okay, but the evidence is not lechatchila. Right. That's why, really, in theory, you should have separate. Oh my goodness, plastic containers. What are they called? What's wrong with me? Tupperware. Thank you. Right? You should have separate Tupperware, right? I don't know, red tops and blue tops. In our house, there's green tops, and then they get lost tops all the time. They get mixed up all the time, and you're always throwing out new ones. And after all, you clean out your cupboards because you only have like bottoms and no tops. Have you ever had that when you toss something like that? You get new ones. So there you go. See? I pay attention a little bit. Sometimes I don't. Okay. Now.
We got them from Israel. We got these ones from Israel that actually stay. Like they have the red for the fleshik, the blue for the milk, and green for parv, but they stay meat, dairy, and parv on them. So you can't really get them.
Okay. One thing that Yael asked something, and I think I got tripped up with it. I didn't say something clearly. Up until now, we're only talking about dishes that were not ben yomo, that were ben yomo. Right? Meaning that in the last 24 hours, I used these utensils, I used these pots for what they were. Meaning, in the morning I cooked this pot with milk, and in the afternoon I want to cook pasta in this pot and serve with meat. Right? The question is going to be, what about if it's been more than 24 hours? What about if it's Eino ben Yomo? It could be with Eino ben Yomo, we're going to be more lenient. And I forgot to make that distinction. Okay? So up until now, I want to be very clear about this. We're talking about a case where it's ben Yomo, meaning in the past 24 hours I use my pot, and now I want to use it for something parv, and then use that pasta for the opposite species. But what about if it's Eino ben Yomo? I haven't used it in a week. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear before. So here we go. If it's not Eino ben Yomo, if the pot that the food was roasted was not used in the last 24 hours, the food may be eaten with the opposite type. For example, potato kugel was baked in a milchik pan that wasn't used in the last 24 hours. It can be served on one's meat dishes. So that is much more practical. Because now what I can do, I can take a kugel that I made on Shabbos, made sure it was totally parv, which you have to make sure that's actually not so clear. But let's say I was totally careful that it was parv, and now I want to serve this kugel Monday night with dairy. I want to have it Monday in the afternoon for a snack with coffee, right? Whatever. So I would be allowed, and I want to serve it on dairy dishes and having coffee. So that I would be allowed to do. Why? Because it's been more than 24 hours since I've used the dishes. Okay? So that's That's an important distinction to make. So if potato kugel is baked in a milchik pan, I'd be allowed to serve it on fleishik dishes, or vice versa.
So if you make pasta in a fleishik pot and you know that it hasn't been used in the last 24 hours, that has the status of par pasta.
And that has the status of par pasta. Right. But you have to wait the 24 hours.
And is it still like with chachila?
And so that's a very good question. Here comes the Chochmas Adam, and he is going to say the following. He says that in this case as well, one may not intentionally use the Eino Ben Yomo meat pan if one wants to serve the food on milchik dishes. However, if no other pan is available, it can be used. The Chochmas Adam, who is the same author as the Nishmas Adam, a number of different Sfarim. Chai Adam, he died 100 in the 19th century, 150 years ago or so. So he says, and it's a fairly big, again, it's not a chumrah. He says you shouldn't be cooking milchik suflei dishes, right? Even if it's in a binyamo, you shouldn't be doing it lechatchila. Now, what happens, and therefore, that's why we tell people really, 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 really to try to even avoid using food that was cooked, even if it's 24 hours, to put it on the opposite gender, right? So your pasta that you're cooking in a milchik pot should ideally never be used, even a few days later, with fleishik, so a fleishik pot or fleishik pan or fleishik plate. If you have no choice, what's an example if you have no choice? You're at a grandparent's house. You're traveling. You know what I mean? Those are the cases. Those are cases you have no choice. Well, you can usually have paper, but let's say you don't have paper or something. Okay, during cooking, what happens that if a drop of milk falls onto the pot while par food was being cooked on the pot? So you're making your pasta, and a drop of dairy goes onto the pot. Again, this pot is obviously a fleishik pot. What? Outside of the pot. Yeah. Is your pot dairy?
On the fire?
Yeah, it's on the fire. You're cooking. No, so sorry. Let's assume it's even a milchik pot. Let's assume it's a milchik pot. The question is going to be if dairy falls onto your pot while you're cooking your pasta, is that going to make your pasta real dairy now, as opposed to just cooked in a dish which is part of the... So that will... So what does he say here? So he says the following. If there isn't 60 against the drop, it doesn't have the law of nat bar nat. Rather, it's stricter. Meaning, if you don't have 60 amount, let's assume that it is with the food line, let's say you can include everything with it. So he's saying you're going to need 60 times the amount of the pasta to nullify that one drop. Otherwise, it could make your pasta, milchik. And that would be obviously more serious. So therefore, the food is afterwards cooked with meat, it'll become forbidden. Why? Because you're going to have a lot of pasta that's real milchik. And if it's real milchik, cooked with meat, generally speaking, most households that I know of have more pasta than meat when they cook. Right? So if you're going to have a lot of pasta and a little bit of meat sauce, you're going to get yourself into big trouble and trafe up all your food. So if you're going to want to keep something parv, you need to make sure that nothing's going to be, dripped onto it, which I think is kind of obvious, but the stakes are higher, definitely. And what's the rationale behind it? That the taste of the pot is considered connected to the food, and as if the food was cooked with the milk. Okay. For others who argue on the chavedas, it's actually a machlokas. You should try to definitely avoid it. a drop of milk falling on the outside of the pot, inside the pot on your food, is obviously that's going to be connected. That's a given. Outside of the pot, if it drops, again, I think we will be subject to the food line. Let's assume it's at the bottom where it's going to be schlepped in by the food. You really should ideally be machmir. In certain cases, maybe you can be lenient. So, yeah. Yes.
Just the part where it says the potato kugel was cooked in a rubber pan that was
Mm-hmm.
not used in the last 24 hours and be served on the dishes. So it's the pan that it was cooked in that wasn't used for 24 hours.
Right.
It's not that you're waiting 24 hours to use it to put
Right.
it on dishes.
Correct. Right, but what's happened is that it was cooked in a pot or a pan that wasn't used for meat for 24 hours, and I'm taking that kugel and I'm putting it onto a dairy dish on Sunday. And that he see the Chavdas was the Chavdas, the Chochmas Adam doesn't even like that and says you should try to avoid that. So that's it should. I don't like when people do it. L'chatchila, I don't like when people do it. I mean, I think, l'chatchila, you should try to have separate dishes for everything, right? So what do we generally do? We generally tell people you want to have your potato kugel at that dairy meal, just have it first, right? Serve it, put it onto paper. You eat it.
Right, it's the same with the pasta. It doesn't matter how long you wait before you get the pasta.
Right. No, true. No. It's a matter of what it was cooked in. No, that's 24 hours. Yeah. Okay. Cooking we did. Right, you're using the same warming trays for milk and flakes is a problem. You should sort of avoid doing that as well. Okay, practical halacha section. Okay, in general, one should always check with the rabbi such an issue. Okay, Sephardi custom is like the mechaber. Therefore, one may not intentionally cook food in a meaty pot with milchiks. However, if it was cooked in a meaty pot without intentionally with milchiks, you can eat it with milchiks. Ashkenazim, the Architecture says, the father opinion of the Shach, who says that if roasting occurs in one kind of pot, the food is aser if it is mixed with the opposite type. However, there are room to be lenient. We generally are machmir when it comes to the roasting. And we'll say that if it gets roasted, you don't have the same type of leniency. Again, we find where the roastings today. Use roasting pans, barbecues. Most things are usually cooked. Okay, this is a great question. Because now we're going to take the exact same principles of milchiks and fleishiks, and we're going to connect it to a minhag that we're all familiar with. And that is, the Gemara says you're not allowed to have meat and fish together. Why? It's a sakana. So the question is going to be, do we treat it the exact same as avoiding fleishiks to milchik dishes crossover, or is there going to be lenient? There's a great source here that I was very happy that he brought. That is a tremendous chidush. That is so revolutionary. If a rabbi were to say this today, he would be ostracized for being revolutionary. But it was said by none other than the Chazon Ish himself. So he was able to get away with it. I mean, it's unbelievable what he's going to say, and it's very important. Take a look at the meat and fish section. We have 10 minutes, we should finish. Okay. Let's go down. Here we go. Same situation where I have fish cooked. I have fish that is being cooked in a. Actually, like this. Can I cook fish in a meat pot, or can I serve fish on a fleishik plate? Right? Do you need to have fish plates? Or can you serve fish on the same plates that you usually serve meat? So here we go. The Mechaber, next page, says that one should not eat meat and fish together because it causes leprosy. The Taz says this is only true if they're cooked together, but if a small amount of fish falls into meat, again, right, it is not negated 1 out of 60, and we are machmir. Can you believe it? We are more machmir by fish falling into meat than dairy falling into meat. That it is not batel 1 out of 60. Why? Because when it comes to sakana, something which is like dangerous, we're more strict in something which is aser. It is sakana chumra mi'isura. That something which is dangerous, we're more strict about than something which is forbidden. That being said, hold on. The Nekudos HaKesef argues and says, no! When we talk about things that are dangerous, we mean venom, poison, snake venom. And if snake venom, and I'm sure, without this, up until now, I'm sure you would eat snake venom that went into one of your foods, and now you won't, right? But snake venom, something which is a real full-fledged sakana, isn't nullified in 60. But fish with meat is like all other isurim, and is batel b'shishim. Okay. The Gemara goes on to say that fish in a meaty dish, whether one may serve it together with mocheks, we see it is permitted to cook fish in a meat pot, even if it's bein yomo. Believe it or not. So I'd be allowed to even cook fish in a meat pot that was just used for meat a few hours ago. Why? Because it weakens the taste, and you're not cooking it mamash mocheks or fleishiks. It's the taste that's inside the pot doesn't have this interaction with the fish that is considered really dangerous. Okay, if it wasn't clean, the Yad Avram says, according to the Shach, the fish is still permitted. If there's only 60 against, let's say, a little grease that might have been left over in your pot. According to the Taz, the fish is usher, even if there's 60 against it. Now, this is a very important... Sorry, Chazonish, I apologize. It was the Chassam Sofer, my mistake. The Chassam Sofer says that today, so when does the Chassam Sofer live? Chassam Sofer lives 18th century. So what century are we in now? 21st century. So was it 250 years ago or so? Approximately, I think he died about 250 years ago. 250 years ago, the Chassam Sofer says that the nature of man has changed, and it doesn't, meaning this fish-meat combo no longer poses a serious hazard to our health. The Isser still is in effect, but this dangerous contamination isn't. Therefore, we can be lenient in cooking our fish in a meat pan. I don't believe, if I were to ask all of you, does your family have certain pots or pyrex that they only use for fish? Right? We do. So we have a couple that you have, this is only used for fish, but we see it. So this is an amazing kula b'chasam sofer, because otherwise, maybe perhaps you should avoid using the same pots and pans that you had for meat, also for fish. But regardless, the Nekudos HaKesef for sure holds that it is batel b'shishim. So between the Nekudos HaKesef, which says you could lie 1 in 60 nullification, between the Chassam Sofer, who says that it's not as effective today, definitely you could rely on the nullification 1 to 60. In terms of milchik, fish pans, I know that my Rav said, okay, you should really try to be machmir and try to also have fish pots as well. It is generally not the prevailing custom. You don't hear people registering today, right? You're registering for your meat, milk, and fish, right? You don't usually hear that. It's not one of the common things that people register for. We have a few people are doing it, right? So I don't think people are doing that today. But we see there's definitely room to be lenient. But okay, we have also a family who's machmir, so there you go. The Sifzei Das says that when cooking in water, we count the water and fish to dilute the leftover meaty grease. If one's roasting, the piece of fish is counted to negate the meaty grease by 60. Okay, good, wonderful. We learned a couple of very important principles. They're called no sein tam bar no sein tam. That's literally omitting taste, then omitting taste to get it to something else. We see that if there's 3 of them, there's definitely room to be lenient, meaning the meat into the pot into the water into your fish, your water into your pasta. Much more room to be lenient. We saw a distinction between ben yomo and eno ben yomo, yet we even saw an opinion which held that you should try to really still avoid, even if it's eno ben yomo, you should still try to avoid eating it on the opposite species plates. Definitely much more to be lenient b'diavad. If you're stuck, you probably don't have to go to the same lengths as you would if it was ben yomo. Meaning that if you're going to someone else's house, you're going to a grandparent's house who aren't as strict as of kashrut that you are, I don't know if you have to point it out to them necessarily. As long as the pots are not ben yomo, you'd be allowed to have that pasta on the other type of plate for sure. No question about it. In terms of cooking fish in a meat pot, definitely to be lenient. You should definitely try to at least make sure that pot is clean. But if it was a little bit of residue fleshek left over, it's definitely bato b'shishim. Definitely, it's not as potent as it used to be, according to the Chasam Sofer, and therefore you'd be allowed to eat it. But again, the chatchila definitely should be either you have your fish pots, or it should be super duper